Well, you know what smart people say. Don't drink and drive. Definitely don't drink and fly. Don't drink and read the news and then make YouTube videos. Yeah. The smart people are probably correct. Not being one of those smart people, I wouldn't know for certain. In the past, if you look at my videos, there is one about the shoot down of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17. I talked about working a flight from Xiamen to Kuala Lumpur the evening when MH17 happened. We were busy with the departure tasks at the time, and I had not yet brought up an HF radio to see what the BBC was talking about for headlines. It was a busy flight with a typhoon right in the area between Hong Kong and Sanya airspace. Interestingly, on this 9th anniversary of MH17 being shot down, there is a similarly placed typhoon heading towards Sanya and the Tonkin Gulf. Indeed, I was just looking through the news and found something I'm going to comment on in this video. We know a lot about what happened, but hell if some folks aren't deeply involved in MH17 fuckery on behalf of Vladimir Putin. Let's go through this article posted to the Express. Putin's chilling message to Xi Jinping after downing a flight MH17, leave it to me. Yeah, sure. Putin? Fuck that guy. Unless the bastard strokes out and dies, or his cancer gets him, there is going to be a reckoning. The Express article was written by Joel Day, who was very careful to hedge his position and protect himself with careful wording. Hey Joel, be careful, bruh. Don't get hurt. So Bellingcat recently put out a video discussing the facts that we know to be true regarding MH17 and a lot of the disinformation surrounding the events. Bellingcat is on target. If you find this video, watch it. So this article in the Express continues. It's been 9 years since flight MH17 was shot down while flying over eastern Ukraine. All 238 passengers and 15 crew were killed after a surface-to-air missile was fired at the commercial aircraft. The 9 years have plagued all those involved, especially the families of the perished, who have yet to receive full closure over the person and country responsible for the deaths of their loved ones. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about closure. Motherfuckers, there is no closure. Time keeps moving on, that's all. You figure out how to move on, or not. The perp that we all know is behind the crime is still alive, and he is still free. It took until February of this year for Dutch investigators to conclude that Russian President Vladimir Putin likely supplied the missile that downed the flight. Likely. There's no likely about it. It was a Russian missile and a Russian crew. Back then, in 2014, the Ukrainian region had for months been engulfed in a bitter and intense conflict between Russian-backed separatists and the Ukrainian state, a battle that spilled over into the rest of Ukraine in early 2022. The Russian-backed separatists are actually Russians, with Russian money, Russian equipment, Russian know-how. They were Russians. And there's a photo of the wreckage still burning. This is a G-rated photo of the wreckage. So the ground handlers that we had in Kuala Lumpur were Malaysian Airlines people, and they told us what had happened after we shut down and opened the cabin door. First thing they said was that something really bad had happened to one of their planes, and I went inside, did my final paperwork for the day, and then went to the hotel and went on the internet. before the BBC and CNN and other mass media people had their reporters really on this set of events, video was starting to appear on the web, and there was just horrendous, horrific stuff. Just raw video from the wreck, really gruesome. A lot of bodies, some that appeared to be sleeping, some very badly mangled, had suffered a lot of trauma. The newspapers were mostly posting sanitized shots like this one, where you don't see the true horror of it. The text continues. Suggestions that Putin was implicated in the crime against humanity have been floated for years, with private investigators and authors all attempting to find the true culprit. Motherfuckers, we know exactly who the true culprit was. Don't play word games. In 2021, Florence de Changy, a foreign correspondent for the French publication Le Monde, threw her hat into the ring with her book, The Disappearing Act, The Impossible Case for MH370. The MH370 disaster was separate from MH17, but Ms. de Changy believes the two incidents are linked, claiming that Putin himself became actively involved in the disasters to improve his political pedigree on the global stage. Among some of the goals Ms. de Changy accuses Putin of pursuing were to get revenge on the US and to better his relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Both Russia and China, Ms. de Changy says, suspect the US of shooting down Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, which disappeared in mid-flight in March 2014 while it was flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing months before the shooting down of MH17. So, she says that both Russia and China suspected the US was involved in MH370, but then she says that she believes Putin was using it to get revenge on the US to improve his relationship with Xi. Well, it's got to be one or the other. You can't have both. Either Putin did it or the US did it. Personally, I think that neither Putin or the US did it. I think something happened on the plane. Maybe some bad guys tried to take over and were unsuccessful in actually going someplace and doing something with the plane. Maybe a 9/11 style attack on KL. I don't know for sure, but it very well could be. They turned off the transponder and turned off course. We know that. As to the rest, maybe we'll never know. Unless someone can find the wreckage, get hold of the CVR, and look at the digital data. The CVR might be no good, considering how long it could be between the plane turning off its radios and exiting its flight plan route and when it would crash into the Indian Ocean. With time, we'll find out. Okay, continuing the text. On board MH370 were 153 Chinese citizens, of 227 total passengers, all of whom were presumed dead. Linking the two incidents, Ms. de Changy writes about a source who appears to allege Putin's hand in the MH17 disaster. The source says that Putin, speaking to Xi after MH Flight 370, said, "What happened is not acceptable, leave it to me." Downing MH17, Ms. de Changy argues, gave the Russian president a chance to send a message to Washington, "You mess with us, we'll mess with you." Speaking to The Sun, she said, "What is obvious is that the likelihood of this double accident is basically beyond statistics. We have two planes of the same model and same company destroyed in 4 months. Should not be treated as bad luck." Well, she has a point. I considered it extremely bad luck and possibly quite a bit of wrongdoing. We don't know if the two are related, though. Here's a picture taken on one particular day when the press were visiting the crash site. The soldiers were led by a man known as Grumpy. This gentleman here. He has been nicknamed Grumpy because of his demeanor on the day that these photos were taken. The press has talked a bit about him. And in fact, I've got a little bit more about this guy. Let's go to an article that I wrote for my own website, ab9il.net. This I wrote shortly after MH17 went down. The title is Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, Simply Mass Murder. I basically wrote about the events and ranted a bit on how badly things were being handled. I'm going to move down to the text. This was written shortly after the shoot-down of MH17, and then in 2015 I wrote an update, just this one line here. See the Bellingcat report on MH17, the open source evidence that Russia downed MH17 in the course of forcibly and unlawfully taking territory from Ukraine. And then later, in the year 2019, I added another short update for the readers. I said, pay attention to current events. United States President Donald Trump is facing impeachment for interfering with congressionally approved aid, including weapons for Ukraine, as a means of pressuring Ukraine to help Trump's election race against Joe Biden. Look below the surface and you will see a pattern of Trump behavior supporting Russian interests against Ukraine and other friends of the USA, such as Afghanistan. Regarding Ukraine, it is highly offensive that Trump wants to help Vladimir Putin, who has lied from day one about Russia's role in the attack on MH17. Neither the lives of MH17 passengers and crew nor the truth matter to Putin and Trump. I'll say that again. Human lives and truth don't matter to Trump or Putin. Like gangsters, they suggest thoughts and prayers for the dead, but no mea culpa by Russia. Eat your neighbors, you cannibals, but don't forget to say grace. So in the article, I give some of the facts that we know for sure. MH17 departed Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, the four-letter identifier Echo Hotel Alpha Mike at 10:14 UTC. 298 people aboard, including a flight and cabin crew, totaling 15. It was a 777-200, registration 9 Mike Romeo Delta, on the way to Kuala Lumpur, Whiskey Mike Kilo Airport. I talk a bit about where the passengers were from, where they're going, emphasizing that these are civilians, just regular people like you and me, all with their lives and having nothing to do with the fighting going on down below. They expected safety. They did not expect to be killed by a murderous missile crew picking a target from the aircraft overhead and being blown out of the sky. The flight situation was routine as it cruised at flight level 330 over Ukraine, just northwest of the towns of Pelahivka and Grabovo. Suddenly and without warning, all contact with MH17 was lost at 1315. That's not quite correct. I wrote 1315 in my text, but the transcript indicates that their last transmission was at 1319 and 56 seconds. Minutes later, aircraft parts, human remains, luggage, and other kinds of debris emerged from the clouds above the Ukraine countryside and rained down on a 15 square kilometer area, and that's around Pelahivka and Grabovo. gruesome beyond imagination. People on the surface witnessed their roads, houses, and fields being pelted by debris. One elderly woman reported a passenger, still strapped in his seat, slammed through her home's roofing and came to rest as a mangled mass on her bed. Others reported the falling of aircraft structure into their yards. Wheat and sunflower fields between the two Ukrainian towns were peppered with most of the wreckage of MH17. Clothing was torn from the passengers' bodies when the airplane disintegrated and fluttered down for some time after everything else had reached the surface. Looking at the transcript, things appeared to be routine. MH17 was doing some weather deviations. It was summertime and there were some thunderstorms, some buildups in the area. They had gone off route and were coordinating with Dnipro radar. As you can see at time 1308, Dnipro radar calls them and gives them some instructions. What happened first was MH17 checked in. Dnipro radar, Malaysian 17, flight level 330. And then radar comes back. He says, Malaysian 17, Dnipro radar, good day, radar contact. Malaysian 17 acknowledges. And then at 13:19 and 21 seconds, there's a phone call. The controller talks to Rostov and coordinates. He wants to send Malaysian 17 over to waypoint RND. Actually, I think it's a VOR station on the ground. Wants him to go to RND, and then after that, bring them back onto their route at waypoint Tingka. The controllers coordinate, and the phone call ends. At 13:19 and 49 seconds, radar calls the flight and gives them the following clearance. Malaysian 17, due traffic, proceed direct to point Romeo November Delta. Romeo November Delta, Malaysian 17. So MH17 acknowledges that. Now they have a clearance to a point which is not on their flight plan, and they're on an instrument flight plan. They need more. They need a point to expect. So the controller calls them and tells the flight, Malaysian 17, after point Romeo November Delta, expect direct to Tingka. Tango India Kilo November Alpha. Right? So now if they lose communications, they know they can fly after RND, direct Tinka, and rejoin their route and continue until they can do something about their loss of communications. That's just an instrument flying thing. So the controller calls him with that amendment to their clearance, and he gets no response. This is at 13:20. He gets no response. About a minute and 10 seconds go by. Doesn't hear anything. He calls him. Malaysian 17, how do you read me? Malaysian 17, Dnipro radar. The controller sends that call, and then half a minute later calls him again. Yet another half a minute later calls him again. He says, Malaysian 17, Dnipro radar. Right? Gets no response. The controller then goes to the telephone, calls Rostov, asks if they see Malaysian 17, and Rostov says there's no transponder response, but there are a whole bunch of primary radar returns in that area. And there's a suggestion that the aircraft has come apart, that those are parts of the plane that's debris showing up as primary radar returns. I have another section in the article here saying that sophisticated weapons destroyed MH17. Talked about the SA-11 bulk missile and information mostly from Bellingcat and sources that supplied that to Bellingcat. And they talked about a Russian missile that came across the border, was set up, fired one missile, which is what downed MH17, and then the bulk crew drove back across the border. They thought they got away with it. And I've got some pictures. This one here is a CDU panel. There's a CDU panel and various other parts of the structure. It looks like maybe the throttle quadrant here. Throttle, speed brake levers, etc. That's from the cockpit. Those fuckers. And some armed military guards standing around the wreckage. Our man Grumpy. Hey, I wonder if Grumpy is still alive. Do you think he's still living? Maybe, maybe not. Here's another shot of Grumpy standing in the road and a bunch of reporters all milling around. So yeah, over the years, we've seen a lot of that fellow that I call Grumpy. And there's another section, obstructionist behavior by the separatists. I still called them separatists back then when I wrote this article. They're not separatists. They've wanted Ukraine the whole time. Maybe they thought they could just take the eastern part and then decided during the war maybe they could take the whole country. Hey, we'll see how that works out. I think they're going to lose the whole country, and Russia itself is fucked as well. Vladimir Putin, I heard he's got pronouns. Was, were. So, to cut out some of my rant and get on topic here, this talks about the obstructionism and disregard for the crime and the dead. Basically, the people down on the ground around the wreckage were walking around, looting, keeping the investigators out, and showing general disrespect for the dead and for the investigation. Mostly being a bunch of assholes. And there were claims that they were irate because, nobody cared because the victims were foreigners. And they used it in a pejorative term as though they meant to say fucking foreigners. So that's how they felt about the people that rained down from the sky into their contested battle space. The perpetrators had their communications intercepted. There were cell phone conversations that were picked up, and there's also some measure of surveillance on the radar signals, certainly from the SA-11 missile. Apparently there are a lot of eyes and ears out there. The intelligence agencies were watching the conflict, and they were well aware of what happened. On July 19th, 2014, that's 9 years ago tomorrow, the United States State Department issued a statement. They assessed that MH17 was likely downed by an SA-11 surface-to-air missile from separatist-controlled territory in eastern Ukraine. And it just makes me mad that the word separatist keeps being used. We know who it is now, 9 years later. We know that it was part of a Russian operation to take territory from Ukraine, if not take all of Ukraine. They talk about surveillance that revealed who was talking about what happened. And indeed, they were culpable. They screwed up. They know they screwed up, and they tried to get away. Here's a map. This shows flight paths of aircraft that had moved across that area before the shoot-down occurred. Let's start from the north with this green line. That's Singapore 351 that passed through, went over Donetsk, southeast bound. Here's another one. This is from Air India 113 across Ukraine, again passing by Donetsk and continuing east. this pinkish one here, or shall we say fuchsia, that's Singapore 333. And then we have some other tracks from different planes. Here are some more tracks. This one's from Virgin 301. Yellow and green from Virgin 354 and Lufthansa 754. And way down here, most to the south, is this one, Lufthansa 762. So you can see the tracks. So most of the flights were more to the south. There were these two, which were over Donetsk. That's Air India 113 and Singapore 351. And then there was MH17, which was shot down. Used the missile launcher, trying to sneak back across the border with one missile missing. Vladimir Putin, fuck that guy. This is a picture that I took in Kuala Lumpur. If you go into the terminal and go up an escalator near the offices of Malaysian Airlines, there is a shrine set up. This was up for months with various flowers and items left by people to remember the civilian men, women, and children murdered on flight MH17 and that were lost on MH370. Here's a close-up. This is another one of my pictures that I took. They say you're not totally dead as long as somebody living remembers you. So there we are. The last thing I wrote in that article that I posted on ab9il.net was just my intense sense of offense as a pilot that a civilian airliner was shot down, and then all of the lying and BS that happened afterwards to cover for Vladimir Putin. If you want to know more, find Elliot Higgins and Bellingcat and look up their recent work. We're going to go back to this article from the Express and continued. I went off on a bit of a tangent because of this photo and Mr. Grumpy right there. We'll continue with the article from Mrs. Dechengi. She's the one who wrote a book about MH370 and MH17, and it's being written about by the article here, Mr. Joel Day. Joel Day is being very careful not to say Putin is guilty as fuck, go get him, try him and hang him. He's not enraged enough. He's being very careful not to say inflammatory things like that, but I can say it. Fuck that guy, Putin. Hey, and his friend Donald Trump, who's on his side, fuck him too. He's going to jail. Mr. Changi says, I noticed that she and Putin were getting closer than ever during that period of time. That's the summer of 2014. And that they happened to have been physically together in Brazil when MH17 was down. I think she's trying to say that they were both attending a conference, not that they were spending the night together. Now I want you more than ever. No, they were both attending some meetings in the same place in the same time. That's what she's trying to say. So the day before, they talked of taking their relationship to a new and higher level. Putin mentioned striking the iron while it's hot. He means there's an opportunity to build a better relationship between the two countries, China and Russia. She discussed her theory with people in the world of intelligence, and she was met by a rather surprising amount of agreement. In fact, she was told that the more outrageous, the more likely it's to be true in this kind of operation. I can't completely agree with that. There is a lot of really outrageous stuff that we know today is not true. Just look at all of the conspiracy theories revolving around the virus and various other things. There are a lot of conspiracy theories that are used as disinformation for the purpose of manipulating people. Think of Pizzagate, for example. And you know what? The last destructive conspiracy theory has not emerged yet. There are more to follow because information warfare is continuing. The writer continues. I should say the writer of this Express article, Mr. Joel, continues. Others have made similar links, including Jeff Wise, a journalist, who in his book The Plane That Wasn't There argues that Russia downed both flight MH17 and MH17 in order to tell the West, you can hurt us with sanctions, but don't sleep too soundly at night. Now that does not totally make sense. Why attack the Malaysians for sanctions that are being driven mostly by the US and UK? That does not make sense. But he said it. "9 years on, the pursuit of justice for the victims killed in MH17 continues. In recent years, the Dutch court has made significant steps forward in advancing the case, including finding 3 men, 2 Russians and a Ukrainian, guilty of murder in absentia and sentencing them to life in prison. A 3rd Russian was acquitted. Lengthy investigations concluded that a Russian-made missile had been supplied by Russia and fired by an armed group under Russian control. Just say the Russians did it. Why play these fucking word games? That's just as stupid as thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers means take the pain and don't seek justice. It's time for justice, people. And I'll tell you what, without justice there isn't going to be peace. Follow the talking points, follow the money, and follow the bullets. We in the West are fighting them. They are friendly with the far-right fascist Republicans because the far-right fascist Republicans will let them kill and steal. When you hear talking points admonishing us to not agitate those murderers because they have nukes, ask yourself, how far do you intend to bend over and allow them to take you? If they think you are weak, sooner or later you will have to go to war against them and deploy all of the weapons you hate or fear. Better to strike first and worry about doing the right thing than to get hit and wish you had done something before it was too late. This has been a production of Mach 7 Radio Intercepts. Thank you for watching. Alpha Mike Foxtrot.